Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm Jon Macri, joined as always for these start sit shows by the great Nic Bodiford. Nick, we're looking to close out September on a high note here, especially since, it's early enough in the season that even 0-3 teams shouldn't be giving up hope. So how you feeling as we look to wrap up this first month of the season?
I'm tired. I'm not 0-3. I'm tired. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, it could be a grind in season, right? Like hopefully, we can get a second wind here, but yeah, it's still early in the year, but there's definitely a lot to cover an entire week. So I understand the tired feeling for sure. But yeah, this is going to be good. We're going to do kind of the same thing we've been doing every week so far. We're going to go through some of our favorite quarterback streamers, defensive special team streamers, wide receiver cornerback matchups, wide receiver man zone data, some O-line D-line matchup information, as well as some cherry picked players from Nate's Start Sit article that I'd like to highlight as well. And like last week as well, we'll also be looking at a couple of the top waiver wire names and kind of what to do with them now that we have them on our roster. So, Nick, what do you say we get this thing going? And we'll start with our quarterback streamers of the week, like we always do. You've highlighted a couple names that you like this week, and I've added in one as well. So who's your first name on the list?
Yeah, first name, Justin Fields, facing the Indianapolis Colts. One thing that stands out to me is Fields, he's really dialed in his arm. He's throwing the ball a lot better. From the QB defense streamers of the week piece, Fields has tallied 16 passing attempts deemed accurate by PFF this year, tying for second most among NFL quarterbacks. He averaged just 29.3 total season to season since entering the league in 2021. He has not been the game-wrecking, rushing QB that we know him to be, but I don't think that he's just incapable of doing that. He's still breaking tackles at a very high rate, ranked 6th in missed tackles forced per rushing attempt among quarterbacks with at least 10 rushing attempts. The Indianapolis defense just lost DeForest Buckner to injured reserve. Their pass rush is kind of so-so. But Buckner, he was a force. He's an interior defensive lineman, force both in the pass rush and in run defense. I think without him, they're going to kind of struggle to hold the point. The defense as a whole, the linebacker core ties for the 5th most missed tackles, 18 among NFL linebacker cores. I think this is the kind of matchup that Fields can exploit, and I think this is a top 12 week for him.
Yeah, I like that call. I mean, it's also like a good matchup according to our strength of schedule tool. I think it's the 5th best matchup for quarterbacks this week. They're also unlikely to be without Kenny Moore, who's their primary slot defender, right? So he's banged up. That could help the situation a little bit. Nate also highlighted Fields as a start in his Start Sit article and noted that Fields has been particularly better against zone coverage both this year and for his career. And the Colts are one of those teams. They deploy a top 5 rate of zone coverage with Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator. So Fields has just been generally like really good this season. 81.0 passing grade. That's 5th best among quarterbacks this season. So yeah, I'm with you. I know he hasn't been, like you said, that elite runner that we've come to know him as, but he's getting the job done and he's winning and he's playing well. So whatever works, and I like this matchup too.
Yeah. So on the Kenny Moore point, I didn't know that he was trending toward not playing. Kenny Moore, he starts on the perimeter, and then in their nickel package, he moves inside. He's kind of their chess piece. He's their number one cornerback. I think if they had better cornerbacks, they'd have him just play slot full time, but they're so kind of talent bereft there that they ask him to do anything. Anyway, that's awesome. I didn't realize he was trending toward missing. On to the second QB here, Caleb Williams versus Los Angeles Rams. Caleb was way better last week. Now, he dropped back a ton, but we did see improvements in his per play rates. He had yet to throw a big establishment. What am I trying to say? He had 0 big time throws. His big time throw rate in weeks 1 and 2 were 0.0%. Last week jumped up to 3.5. He dropped his turnover worthy play rate from 5.8 to 1.6. Average up the target went up 7 to 11.2. Anyway, he's now facing the Los Angeles Rams pass defense, which a week ago lost its highest graded coverage defender. Safety John Johnson. We saw Juwan Jennings torch the center of the field in prime time, or what it felt like prime time. Los Angeles allows the third highest explosive pass plays allowed rate, the most yards per coverage snap. And its pass rush, it's not as bad as it seems. Like they do have okay players, but Aaron Donald, one was a monster, and two did a lot to tell everyone what to do. They're 13th in pass rush win rate. I do think that unit eventually can figure their stuff out, but right now they're 27th in sacks, only got 4 so far. I think Caleb has another usable QB1 week this week.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. I definitely felt encouraged after Caleb Williams' week 3 game. The first interception, that was bad. He was late on that throw, and that, shouldn't have happened. But second interception, like not nearly as bad. Like probably shouldn't have thrown it into double coverage there in the first place. But Nick Cross and Jalen Jones really made a pretty remarkable play there. But like you said, like 363 passing yards, love that. Finished as QB 10 on the week. First 2 big time throws of the season. Just that one true like turnover worthy play. And like you said, Rams defense been among the NFL's most zone heavy defenses this season, but ranked bottom 5 in defensive success rate at 35.9%, yards allowed per reception 12.9, and they placed last in yards allowed per coverage snap and yards allowed per coverage target. So like the progress for Caleb and like the matchup as well. Okay, next up, Nick, I feel like we need to show some ginger solidarity to our brother Andy Dalton, who is in a revenge game this week against the Bengals. And for me, looking at this matchup, specifically in the trenches, I like his chances of kind of keeping his momentum going from last week, a relatively strong week there, and potentially here as well. Because a big part of it for me has to do with that Panthers offensive line, which has earned the 3rd best pass blocking grade on the year with an 82.3, while allowing the lowest pressure rate of 11.2% in the league. The Bengals defensive line, you look at them, they've earned just a 58.1 pass rush grade this season, which ranks 27th, while yielding the 7th worst average time to pressure at 2.62 seconds. So yes, they have Trey Hendrickson, who is amazing, but he's just one man, right? And I guess I realize that I sound kind of like the Joker referencing Batman on that. He's just one man. But the Bengals D-line really is like almost solely dependent on Hendo to generate a pass rush, right? He has 14 pressures, 3 sacks, and a 76.2 pass rush grade. But again, he's just one man. Sam Hubbard, who's their other starting edge, has a 44.0 pass rush grade. Nobody else on that roster has more than 3 total pressures. So even teams like Atlanta and Arizona have more production from their tertiary options than that. So I'm a believer in the Ginger Ninja after an electric 2024 debut here, where he appeared to kind of revitalize this Panthers offense. So kind of time to see if he's for real here in a revenge game. Like I said, you look at his numbers last week too, delivered 314 of his 319 passing yards from a clean pocket, which led to 2 passing touchdowns and 2 big time throws. He did get away with 2 turnover worthy plays there as well, but still finished with an 80.5 passing grade from a clean pocket, which was the 6th best mark in week 3. So he's kind of in a prime spot for me. Like if I'm looking for a streamer this week, I kind of like Andy Dalton against his former team.
Yeah. The Cincinnati, their defense is going to be, I think, interesting like 2 or 3 weeks from now. They've been playing without their 2 starting defensive tackles, Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill, and both guys kicked off this week with the DNP. So to your point, it's just Trey Hendrickson. He's getting no help from the interior. Sam Hubbard just doesn't, I guess he's not good anymore. I think Andy Dalton, I mean, the downside with Dalton is that he's not going to pick up any rushing production, right. But he's going to be very comfortable in the pocket. So yeah, I think this matchup totally works.
Nice. I like it. All right. Before we keep going here, I do want to shout out our friends at DraftKings. TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you call a touchdown. One thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your bet today. Ready to do a touchdown dance on your own? New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. All right, Nick. Wide receiver time now, and we'll start with the 3 names who draw favorable wide receiver cornerback matchups from your article this week. Who is the first name for you?
First name is Zay Flowers. Baltimore Ravens facing the Buffalo Bills. Curious aspects to this matchup. Buffalo plays a lot of zone defense, and John, you're going to crack some eggs of knowledge on me there as we get into the zone aspect in a little bit. But here's what I like about this matchup for Zay Flowers. Buffalo Bills likely without both of their starting inside linebackers and their starting cornerback. I mean, when I say likely, one of the linebackers is on injured reserve. But anyway, their slot coverage is compromised. They've got a guy named Cam Lewis in there. He is really, really bad. Among 34 NFL slot defensive backs with at least 20 slot receiver coverage snaps, Lewis ranks sixth worst in catch rate allowed, fourth worst in explosive pass plays allowed, second worst in yards allowed per coverage snap, and dead last in targeted rate. He's being targeted on 43.8% of snaps. That is astronomically high. Flowers is a really talented player. So Baltimore, they've got 3 guys who've earned at least 9 targets against zone coverage. Zay Flowers is up there. In the piece, I break down basically his target rate, his touch rate, because he gets involved on the ground as well. I like this because Lamar Jackson looks to Zay Flowers when he's in trouble, when they're facing zone coverage. And Zay Flowers is also just a very good target earner. He is extremely efficient when he is in the slot. Flowers ranks 11th in yards after the catch per reception and 4th in yards per route run, 3.06, #1 overall in target rate. So, yes, I am saying I'm making this bet on the slot coverage aspect. The Bills' perimeter cornerbacks are very good. But I think that they're just going to give Zay Flowers looks. Mark Andrews evidently is cooked. I'm not really sure that. I mean, whatever's going on there is crazy. This is it may be a tough matchup on the perimeter for him, but I think that he's going to finish the day with 10 opportunities offensively, and he's going to get the job done.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I'm with you on Cam Lewis. Just hasn't been nearly what Teron Johnson has been for them, right? And I guess like my only question for like how often he'll be in the slot is going to depend on the game script itself. Like if the Ravens are passing a lot, right? Because they're a team that doesn't spend a lot of time in 11 personnel, right? I think the second lowest rate in the league. So if they do get a lead, which again, I'm not necessarily expecting this to kind of be a blowout or anything where they can run the ball because it should be a closer matchup. So for that part of it, I do like his chances of seeing the slot a little bit more because they're going to have to pass more against this Bills defense and team as well, just for being in a closer game. So I like that part of it. The other part, yeah, like you said, with the zone coverage stuff, I mean, again, it's smaller sample size, but the Bills have played a top 10 rate of zone coverage this season. They're among the better zone defenses in the league. In that regard, they've allowed just 7.8 yards per reception. That's the second best mark. 4.56 yards per coverage snap, also second best, and an 8% explosive play rate allowed. That's the third best. So Flowers, he's been good against zone. He's earned a much better target rate against man, and his yards per route run as well against man is much better at 1.74, 0.96 from zone, but still relatively small sample the first 3 weeks of the season. And if you look back to last year, Flowers was clearly better against zone coverage than man, right? So he had a better receiving grade, better yards per route run, better fantasy points per route run, all against zone coverage than man. So I tend to lean on that larger sample size as a whole, dating back to even 2023, than, you know, the smaller stuff from just this season. So feeling pretty good about Flowers. Like it's a tougher matchup because it's the Bills, but I don't mind Flowers at all.
Cool.
Let's go to the next name on the list here. Who do you got from the Green Bay Packers?
So slot receiver Jaden Reed facing Minnesota Vikings cornerback Byron Murphy Jr. Fortunately, Green Bay, unlike Baltimore, runs a ton of 3 wide receiver sets, and Reed does get snaps on the perimeter from time to time. His 123 offensive snaps ranks second among Green Bay wide receivers. His 13.0% touch rate ranks 8th among 62 NFL wide receivers with at least 10 touches. He has 14 targets and 5 rushing attempts. Jaden Reed, he bizarrely is basically the number one option in this extraordinarily deep Green Bay Packers wide receiver core. Now, that is the case despite the fact that Romeo Doubs is out there, at the highest receiving snap count. But just the way that they run this, they love Jaden Reed. They feature him week to week. Yeah, he's like, it'd be great if he was more inside outside type of a player, but he just kills it, and they keep feeding him the ball. On Byron Murphy Jr., looking at Reed's data there. Among 34 NFL slot back, Murphy ties for 8th worst in catch rate allowed, 2nd worst in target rate, 40%. He ranks dead last in both yards allowed per coverage snap and explosive pass plays allowed rate. I like this a lot for Jaden Reed, and I expect Jordan Love to return. The quirky part of this matchup is that Minnesota blitzes a ton, and I do think that they're going to put pressure on Jordan Love. They're going to be in his ear. With that said, though, Jaden Reed on Jordan Love's 5 pressured passing attempts in week 1, Jaden Reed was the intended receiver on 3 of them. He's kind of the go-to guy when Jordan Love is under fire. So although I don't necessarily love this matchup for Love, I do like it for Reed.
Right. I think that makes sense. I mean, yeah, Reed has been in a bit of a mini slump, right? Like over the past 2 weeks, I think he's finished as outside of the top 40 PPR wide receivers without Jordan Love, obviously, in the lineup. Like that makes a big difference, right? So Love potentially coming back, I think, does help his chances. The Vikings are also one of those more zone heavy defenses, also pretty good in zone, but Reed has been significantly more effective against zone coverages this season. He ranks first among wide receivers who have run at least 20 routes in fantasy points per route run against zone coverage. And again, the Vikings defense is good. It might be a tougher matchup in that regard, but I think for Reed specifically, he has the skill set to kind of overcome that. And especially if Jordan Love is back in, like that just gives him another nice boost there. Okay, last one for your wide receiver cornerback matchups to target. I like these deeper calls here, and you got a fun one with Andre Yoshivas of the Cincinnati Bengals. What do you like about this matchup this week?
So Troy Hill, credit to him for remaining in the league for as long as he has. He's been around for a long time, but with that, it means that we have a lot of coverage data to work with. So looking at Andre Yoshivas, he's facing Carolina Panthers slot cornerback Troy Hill. Looking at Hill's slot coverage data from 2023 through 2024, Hill ranks 15th in catch rate allowed, 17th in targeted rate, 29th in yards allowed per coverage snap, 27th in open target rate, and ties for 20th in explosive pass plays allowed rate. He grades out as the 23rd ranked player. He's fine. He's not great, but they've signed him to a 1-year deal now twice. He's basically the kind of NFL starter / replacement level player who you bring in if you don't have something else, but you do hopefully want to upgrade this position in the long term. Yoshivas with T. Higgins back in the lineup last week. Yoshivas went back into the slot. He had been playing primarily on the perimeter, and while that afforded him more snaps, he was less efficient. In the piece, I've got a whole table in here comparing his pre-snap alignment rates and his productivity, but weeks 1 and 2, he was only at 0.48 yards per out run. Week 3, that jumped up to 1.58. And he also went from 4.5 targets per game to 7. I think he's just outplaying T. Higgins, but I'm kind of a T. Higgins doubter. So, I think that T. Higgins is a starter level player, but he's got 8 recorded hamstring injuries, and he's only 25 years old. Per Dr. Edwin Porras of Fantasy Points, wide receivers experience a 30% re-injury rate with hamstring strains, and his risk is far elevated given how many he's had. So one, I don't even know if he's really going to stay on the field. But I think Yoshivas can kind of just succeed even with Higgins out there, and I think that he is the long-term number 2 there. So I like Yoshi as a wide receiver 3 this week.
Nice. Yeah, that's obviously a great nickname as well with Yoshi. But yeah, the Panthers too, they're, just again, kind of looking at the man zone coverage data right now. They rank top 10 in zone coverage rate this season, but they are 28th in team coverage grade in that regard and 26th in yards allowed per coverage snap from zone. You look at Yoshivas specifically, among wide receivers who have run at least 50 routes against zone coverage, he ranks 19th in fantasy points per route run. So he's been pretty efficient there as essentially a top 20 wide receiver against zone coverage this season for those larger sample size guys. So do like to see that. All right, for me this week, I want to talk about a player who bounced back last week and one that I think continues to do so this week, Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders going against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, again, quiet first 2 weeks of the season, exploded on Monday Night Football, a couple big catches, including a highlight reel touchdown that allowed him to finish as the PPR wide receiver 13 on the week. So, for fantasy managers wondering if they can trust McLaurin again, I think this is like a prime spot for him to kind of keep his momentum going, partly due to a strong advantage in the trenches here. So if we look at the first 3 games of the season, McLaurin has earned just 3 total targets on 33 pressured dropbacks. That's a 9.1% target rate. That's led to just 2 catches for 31 yards. On non-pressured dropbacks, McLaurin has earned a team-leading 16 targets for a 23.9% target rate and 120 receiving yards. We just talked about the Bengals defensive line kind of struggling to create pressure, and that benefited the Commanders last week. The Commanders offensive line has been good. They've earned a 72.9 pass blocking grade this season. That's the 9th best mark. They've also been responsible for just a 2.9% knockdown rate. That's QB hits combined with sacks. That's the 3rd best mark. Cardinals defensive line ranks 24th in pass rush grade. They also rank 25th in pressure rate this season with the 3rd worst average time to pressure. So Jane Daniels should have a cleaner pocket this week. I expect Terry McLaurin to continue getting targeted at a high rate to hopefully deliver another strong fantasy performance against a team that also ranks 30th in team coverage grade with a 47.4. So a nice matchup this week for Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, on the Commanders offensive line, one thing to note, Sam Cosmi on the injury report with an Achilles injury. I would imagine he's probably the highest graded player just because he's great. I'm not looking at that. It's not in front of me right now, but he is really, really dang good. As for Terry McLaurin, I tried to sell him this week, like after the big explosion last week. What he did last week is accurately reflects his talent. But Cliff Kingsbury is such a dunce. He's like, it's McLaurin is during draft season, we will have these players that we get to where we're like, I just don't want to have to make the decision on him. I was drafting him eagerly. I have a lot of Terry McLaurin on Underdog. But like right now, like if we're doing, fast forward a year and Cliff Kingsbury's still employed, he's going to be a guy that I just don't want to have to make the decision on because it's a brutal situation. He is super talented though, and Arizona's defense is really bad. So from a process standpoint, this call makes perfect sense. I can't.
Right. Yeah.
Cliff, get out of here.
Yeah, we talked about definitely the concerns about Terry last week too, right? And like, yeah, he had his big week, and those concerns are going to remain. But yeah, just the matchup this week for me kind of stands out as definitely one that's a positive for him. If we are kind of keep treating him as that fringe starting option. So, on to some wide receiver sits now, Nick. And the first name you have here from your wide receiver cornerback matchups to avoid Courtland Sutton, but maybe more like Courtland Sitton. Know what I'm saying? No. What's got the Broncos wide receiver as an avoid for you this week, coming off his best fantasy game of the year?
Yeah, that's great. So we can keep this one simple. Cortland Sutton and the New York or whatever, Denver Broncos facing the New York Jets, which means that this perimeter receiver has to go face. He's going to, looking at the snap projections, I think he'll face DJ Reed more than he will face Sauce Gardner, but DJ Reed is really, really good too. The wide receiver matchup chart gives Sutton a poor 14.7 receiving matchup advantage rating. That's out of 100 points against Reed. So his prospects are not good. Sutton is still earning targets very well. It's a bummer. I wish he was in a different situation. Among 32 NFL wide receivers with at least 96 receiving snaps, he ranks 6th in target rate, 21.9%, but he ties for 24th in yards per run, 30th in yards after the catch per reception. His 24% contested target rate ranks 10th highest, meaning Bo Nix not delivering the ball well. His 85.7% contested target rate, sorry, the other one was contested catch rate. I need to fix that. 85.7% contested target rate ties for 11th lowest. Anyway, point is, Bo Nix not delivering the ball well. And Sutton has to go face perhaps the best perimeter cornerback unit in the NFL. That's not throwing any shade on the slot coverage because Michael Carter Jr., I see this on Twitter all the time. We should be targeting the slot receivers against the New York Jets. And Demario Douglas, he got there by receptions last week, but Michael Carter Jr. over the last year or two is the most productive slot cornerback in the NFL, meaning limiting opposing wide receiver coverage. Like Michael Carter is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. He is perhaps the league's best slot cornerback. This is just the best cornerback core in the NFL. And I think that the guy catching passes from Bo Nix is not going to get it done. We'll see what happens with linebacker CJ Mosley. He has a bone bruise in one of his toes, so he did not play last week. That drops the run defense efficacy, and Sean Payton, who is looking a little bit outdated, I think he's probably, regardless of the score, is probably going to try to attack that as a weakness. So go ahead and Cortland Sutton in week 4.
Yeah. I'm with you. I was looking at Cortland Sutton in the wide receiver man zone report as well, and looking at the Jets, they've played a top 10 rate of man coverage this season. They've earned above average marks in team coverage grade, yards allowed per reception, yards allowed per coverage snap. They've been good, like you said. Cortland Sutton ranks behind both Josh Reynolds and Lil Jordan Humphrey in target rate when facing man coverage, right? So you mentioned his target rate being good,
what are we doing?
Right, but not against man coverage. That's caused him to rank outside the top 50 wide receivers in fantasy points per route run against man coverage. So I'm with you. I think it is definitely a tougher matchup and one to avoid here for Cortland Sutton. All right. You've also highlighted Gabe Davis as a wide receiver to avoid this week. What's your concern there for the Jaguars wide receiver?
Well, so now he's dealing with a shoulder injury. I think he's going to play. He was, I think, an LP yesterday on Wednesday, so that's a great sign for his availability. But what Houston is doing is they're assigning Kamari Lassiter, second-round rookie Kamari Lassiter, perimeter coverage against the opposition's primary downfield wide receiver. In this case, that's Gabe Davis, not Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas is working at a more varied average depth of target, meaning they're giving him short opportunities as well. Lassiter is already among the league's best perimeter cornerbacks among 64 with at least 40 perimeter receive. Oh, I got to change that. See, I'm coming up and finding my typos here. Perimeter cornerbacks with at least 40 perimeter coverage snaps. No, I'm just screwing everything up here. That is Gabe's. Anyway, Gabe, 17.3% target rate, 14.9 yard average depth of target, and 39th in yards per out run. He's earning targets. They're downfield. They're highly volatile, and he's playing, as he always is, very inefficiently. Lassiter, number 1 overall in catch rate allowed, 33.3%, 11th in explosive pass plays allowed. It's just bodes poorly for Gabe Davis, who's dependent on these deep balls, and Kamari Lassiter. It is volatile, so anything can happen here, but Kamari Lassiter, very good deep ball defender.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. And like you said, these deep threats, like it only takes one for these guys to succeed. So that's always what makes it a little bit tricky. But I'm kind of with you here. Like, I mean, the Texans' strength too, like it has been in coverage, when they're in man coverage, that is, they run a league average rate of both man and zone. And Gabe Davis, he's been seeing coverage, or he's been seeing targets against man coverage. He has a 27.3% target rate versus man compared to just 13.7% versus zone. But he's only been able to come down with 2 catches for 33 yards on those targets. For me, I'm with you. Like, I think Brian Thomas is the better play, like clearly this week. He's produced his fantasy points exclusively actually against zone coverage this season, which happens to be kind of the area of weakness for the Texans coverage unit. He's the team leader in target rate versus zone. He should be, I think, in for a much better game this week. Brian Thomas Jr., that is, after his worst fantasy performance of the season so far last week. So yeah, I like Thomas this week, but not so much Gabe Davis. And finally, who is the last name to avoid from your wide receiver cornerback matchups article?
Yeah, Cleveland Browns slot receiver Elijah Moore going up against Las Vegas Raiders slot cornerback Nate Hobbs. Hobbs ranks top 12 yards allowed per coverage snap, catch rate allowed, forced incompletion rate, and targeted rate. He's a proven NFL slot cornerback. Elijah Moore, conversely, ranks outside the top 25 in targeted rate, catch rate, and yards per out run. He is averaging less than 0.7 yards per out run. Cleveland's offensive line continues to suffer more debilitating injuries. Deshaun Watson is totally busted. We're looking at like a whole passing game to avoid, but I just chose to highlight one player who just should not be considered this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, I maybe get a bit spicy with my pick here for wide receiver to avoid this week. But to be fair, Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders has been a little bit boom bust here to start the year. And I worry that it could be another one of those bust weeks. And full disclosure, like it's not a complete avoid, but more of a situation to kind of temper expectations. If you're looking at, DFS or other formats where you have the entire field to choose from, Adams is more easily avoidable. Some fantasy managers might not have better options to sit him at this point. But that being said, Adams does draw a pretty unfavorable matchup this week with his quarterback likely to feel the pressure here from this Browns pass rush unit. You look at the matchup in the trenches, the Raiders offensive line has allowed an above average pressure rate on the season while also allowing an above average knockdown rate. Meanwhile, the Browns defensive line has earned an 82.5 pass rush grade, which ranks as the 3rd best mark this season. The Browns defensive line has also generated a 33% quick pressure rate. So that's pressures in 2.5 seconds or less, which is the best mark in the league. So how does that affect Adams? Well, on non-pressure dropbacks, Adams has earned a 29.2% target rate. That's the 2nd best mark on the team behind only Brock Bowers with a team leading 26 total targets. As a result, Davante Adams delivered 203 receiving yards and a touchdown on those non-pressure dropbacks. However, when his quarterback is pressured, Adams has seen just 3 measly targets for a 6.7% target rate. That ranks 5th on the team, and it's resulted in just 1 catch for 6 total yards. So even if Myles Garrett isn't fully healthy, I know he's a little bit banged up and doesn't play his full complement of snaps. We saw what he did on like 56% of snaps last week to one of the league's best left tackles in Andrew Thomas. He's still elite. Garrett and this Browns defense, they're going to continue to bring the heat here to Gardner Minshew, which I think in turn is likely going to affect Davante Adams' fantasy potential here in week 4.
Yep, I back it.
Nice. Okay, before we go on to other positions, I want to highlight some of the more interesting nuggets regarding a few wide receivers from my Man Zone Coverage Report article this week. So some quick nuggies here, starting with Drake London going up against the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have played a top 10 rate of man coverage this season and have given up decent yardage in those looks. They've allowed the 6th most yards per reception at 15.0 and the 5th most yards per coverage snaps at 7.14 while in man. And for Drake London specifically, among wide receivers who have run at least 15 routes versus man coverage, he ranks 4th in fantasy points per route run with 1.11 and has earned an elite target rate of 33.3%. So gives him an ideal matchup this week. Also, DeAndre Hopkins of the Tennessee Titans going against the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins have played a league average rate of both man and zone coverages this season, but they rank 30th in team coverage grade while in zone and 26th while in man. So DeAndre Hopkins has actually been Tennessee's most efficient wide receiver against both coverages this season, despite those first two games where he was essentially a ghost, right? Like 0.62 fantasy points per route run versus man, 0.41 fantasy points per route run versus zone. Those are both top 25 marks against each coverage. This to me could be an ideal matchup for him to kind of keep his momentum from last week going after finishing as the wide receiver 16. A double-edged sword here for the Texans wide receivers going against the Jaguars. The Jaguars have been the most man-heavy defense in the NFL this season, but rank as a below-average man defense in yards allowed per coverage snap. But that being said, Tank Dell has provided very little fantasy production against man coverage this season. He's brought in just 1 of his 9 total receptions on the year against man coverages. He's going to see a lot of man coverage this week. I think expectations we can temper for him. Meanwhile, Nico Collins, he was quiet last week. I think he's in line for a massive bounce back week against this specific defense. 36.8% target rate versus man coverage and 0.65 fantasy points per route run. That's a top 15 mark among wide receivers. And last one, Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals going against the Washington Commanders. So Commanders have run a slightly above average rate of zone coverage while ranking among the 10 worst teams in defensive success rate from zone. They're also among the 5 worst zone defenses in explosive play rate allowed and first down plus touchdown rate allowed. Week 4 waiver wire target Michael Wilson here has been much better against zone coverage this season, to the point where he's only seen 1 reception against man compared to 10 versus zone, and it's accounted for 95% of his total fantasy production this season. I think he's in a nice spot here, specifically if or especially, I guess, if Trey McBride, who's dealing with a concussion, can't go for week 4. So those are just kind of a few of the quick nuggets I had for the rest of the wide receivers.
Cool. I'll run through my quick hitters real quick. Yeah. Defenses. So looking at the defenses to exploit, New York Giants versus Dallas Cowboys run defense. The way I look at this is it's sort of a leverage on the field play. Dallas Cowboys, only team with an average depth of tackle over 3.9 yards. They're up at 4.31. Devin Singletary is quietly shredding tackles. He has 17 missed tackles forced, 0.4 per attempt. He's having the 3-game stretch of his life. It's a very ugly play, but I think that he can basically just get there as a volume and maybe talent-based RB2. Tyrone Tracy saw season high 5 rushing attempts in week 3 and also took 100% of the team's 2-minute drill snaps. That's bad for Singletary, but maybe, DFS or a desperation flex play, Tyrone Tracy could be started. Not going to get a ceiling game, but he could pick up a few explosive plays. Daniel Jones, if you are desperate, I think he can get it done on the ground. Now, his ceiling is obviously not as high as some of these elite QB1s, but maybe he can scamper in there for a touchdown on the ground. Dallas Cowboys run defense, very, very, so 29.9 PFF run defense grades out as the league's worst unit. 18 missed tackles, tie for 5th most. 18% explosive run plays allowed rate, likewise 5th most. Dallas defense on the ground, just really, really struggling to put things together. Next one up, Cincinnati Bengals at Carolina Panthers pass and run defense. One thing I want to highlight, they lost Derek Brown, best interior defender probably in the game, but certainly the best defender on the team. Lost him to injured reserve. Now their next 2 defensive tackles are on the injury report, not guaranteed to suit up. They're not very good, but they are also not guaranteed to play, which means they're, maybe starting their number 4 interior defender. So I think Joe Burrow going to have cozy pockets here to distribute the ball. As for the running backs, really driving me up the wall, Chase Brown. So he accounts for 62.5% of the team's explosive run plays, but he is stuck at a 25.6% snap share. He's averaging over 7 yards per attempt, and yet they're still rolling Zach Moss out there. I said last week, that there might be a sell high opportunity this week for Zach Moss. I think that'll probably still be the case this week. At some point, I'd like to think that Chase Brown takes over, but it's not guaranteed. Anyway, I think both can be efficient again here against Carolina. As for the last one, covered some of this dynamic already. Baltimore Ravens versus Buffalo Bills pass and run defense. That interior group is just really banged up for Buffalo. And I think that Baltimore is the type of offense that can exploit it. As for the run defense, Buffalo grades out as the 26th ranked run defense unit and ranks 25th or worse in EPA allowed per run play, explosive plays allowed, and explosive run plays allowed rate.
Nice. Love it. All right. Before we get into the other positions, I do want to give our quick ad break here. 1 second. This podcast is brought to you by the official sunglasses of PFF Gooder. That's Gooder, Goodr. Are you like me and lose too many pairs of sunglasses? Well, good news. Gooder sunglasses do not slip, slide, or bounce while you're enjoying the end of summer. Whether you're on a run, playing pickleball, or hanging at the beach, you know these sunnies will stick to your head. Even better, their stylish sunnies start at only $25 a pair, have a 1-year warranty, and 30-day free returns. From vibrant colors to classic styles, there's a pair of Gooders for every personality. They even have cool new sunnies dropping right now. Designed for both everyday wear and active individuals that love to run, hike, bike, or more. If you need a new pair of sunnies, Gooder is giving PFF Fantasy listeners free shipping. You can go to gooder.com/PFF Fantasy and use code PFF Fantasy for free shipping. Gooder offers a 30-day money-back guarantee and 100% satisfaction. Again, that's gooder.com/PFF Fantasy and use code PFF Fantasy for free shipping. All right, let's go to the running backs next, and we'll start. You mentioned kind of like sell high players, and we probably got a couple of them here in our running back starts. But for the time being, while we have them, they could be in potentially nice spots to start. And I wanted to pull one from Nate's Start Sit article this week, and it is Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So currently RB19 this season. His best game of the week came last week with Andy Dalton at the quarterback, and hopefully reinvigorating that Panthers offense. Has had a pretty consistent role, as Nate points out, playing between 54 to 58% of snaps, and getting the ball at a high rate when he's on the field. This week, they're going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, who, again, we're kind of picking on here. But according to PFF Strength, the schedule tool, that is the 6th best matchup for running backs this season. The Bengals have allowed the 7th most rushing yards this season and have surrendered the 7th most points. So, again, like you mentioned, Nick, 3 out of the 4 Bengals starting defensive linemen didn't practice on Wednesday. Nate also highlights that in the article here. It should not, for Hubbard, he shouldn't just be able to gain like a good number of yards, but has the potential to score at least a touchdown or 2 here in this Carolina offense. Hopefully, if Andy Dalton plays as well as I think he might this week as well, like this could be a nice matchup here for their lead running back in Carolina. So Chuba Hubbard, feeling pretty decent about him. How about you?
Yep. I like the call. I also want to say that if Jonathan Brooks is available, I would pick him up.
Yep.
I don't understand the narrative. Or the Dave Canales coach speak and everything. The guy is now 10 months removed from the ACL. This is the ideal return time. There's been a lot of silliness made about how he was behind schedule because he couldn't participate in training camp at 8 months removed. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe they slow play it, maybe they don't, but he's a starting running back and he might be available in your league. Not saying he's coming back in week 5 for sure, but medically speaking, Jonathan Brooks should be ready to rock a week from now. So just add him. Yeah. But for this week, Chuba Hubbard all the way. Let's do it.
Yeah. I like it. All right, and then we're going to run it back with one of our running back starts from last week who did well for us, Zach Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals as well. So another one of those guys, like you mentioned, probably a sell high candidate. But hey, right now the usage and everything looks pretty ideal here. So Zach Moss coming off the best game of the season in week 3. Again, thanks mostly to strong utilization. He dominated the backfield snaps in all situations, including 100% of the goal line snaps, which resulted in a touchdown, and 83% of the combined 3rd down and 2-minute drill snaps as well. So looking at Zach Moss's potential advantage here in the trenches, The Bengals offensive line has created an average of 1.5 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That's a top 10 mark this season. Meanwhile, the Panthers defensive line, especially without Derek Brown, has allowed 2.0 rushing yards before contact per attempt, which ranks as the second worst mark in the league. Carolina's defensive line also ranks as the sixth worst unit in run blocking grade this season with a 44.8. So for Zach Moss specifically, like when given at least one rushing yard before contact, he's delivered a 42.1% first down or touchdown rate. That's the sixth best mark among running backs with at least 10 carries in those situations. I know he hasn't been like the most efficient back in the league or even on his team, right? But the Bengals, they appear to trust him to kind of carry the load, at least for now, which is, what can pay dividends, I think, in a favorable matchup like this against the Panthers' poor run defense unit. So I still like Zach Moss a fair bit this week. And then for our sit, I pulled this one from Nate's Start Sit article as well. And it's Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Rachaad White averaging 16 carries per game in 2023. That was with minimal backfield competition, like Nate points out. But over the past two games combined, he's run the ball 16 times, as has Bucky Irving, also 16 carries. The difference being that Bucky Irving significantly more efficient with that workload, 84 yards on those 16 carries, while Rachaad White just 35. The offensive line obviously hasn't been great, like Nate points out, but at least Bucky Irving has found a way to be efficient. Head coach Todd Bowles also said that Bucky Irving has kind of earned more snaps going forward. White has scored the 32nd most fantasy points so far this season. And again, if Bucky Irving continues to take that playing time, it's going to continue to just crush Rachaad White. Like he may be relegated to that third down role, which is kind of the concern there. Now, Bucky Irving did show up on the injury report on Wednesday, but if he's not able to go, then that obviously is a lot better for Rachaad White. But it is something at least to kind of keep in mind here with Bucky Irving playing so well, with Rachaad White being so inefficient. And then last week, when you look at, the usage, like Bucky Irving could have very well taken over that entire backfield last week, at least as far as carries go, but Tampa Bay was behind for so much of that game that they had to pass so much. So Rachaad White dominated the snaps that way. So I think in a closer matchup, we could definitely see more Bucky Irving this week, as long as he's healthy.
So a lot of injury stuff here. Bucky Irving not expected to or was officially downgraded to DNP today with the hamstring injury.
All right.
He's better than Rachaad White. I think I saw that he literally juked Alex Singleton into tearing his ACL. But here's the thing. So he might not play. If he does play, I think he is just a more talented rusher than Rachaad White, period. For dynasty purposes, I think this is a buy low window for Rachaad White. It is really hard to find 6 foot, 220-pound running backs who are really good pass catchers. These guys just tend to have long careers. He's inefficient. He can't run the ball, but he can pass protect and he can catch passes. Like, go think Leonard Fournette. Buffalo was signing, a very washed Lenny last year. Like, these guys just stick around. Anyway, Bucky Irving, he's better, blah, blah, blah. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, though, who we just got another injury update with these guys. So A.J. Brown hamstring, Devontae Smith concussion, Britton Covey broke his scapula or something. And okay, Dallas Goedert is off the injury report, so that's good. But it's like they're not going to have an offense. They're just going to – this might just be in a void. It might just be Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley running the ball all day. I do like Bucky Irving. This is shaping up to be a really brutal situation all around. So I don't TBD, I think, for my take here.
I mean, it's fair, right? Like, I didn't see the practice report from today either, right? So if Bucky Irving didn't practice today on Thursday, not a good sign kind of going forward into Sunday, right? So yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense. Like, it definitely kind of a better matchup for Rachaad White if Bucky Irving can't go. Eagles' run defense hasn't been great either, but I think the concern essentially comes from Bucky Irving being in the lineup. But if he's not, then that kind of changes things, right? So All right, let's turn our attention now to a little segment that we like to call WD, WD, WO, WWW, which of course stands for What Do We Do With Our Waiver Wire Wins? Very simple name to remember. Nick, this is where we look at some of the top waiver targets or ads from this week and for the early part of this season, and try to figure out kind of what our temperature is on them if we're ready to trust them in our lineup. So who are some of the names that you wanted to highlight this week?
Okay, so we're going to touch on Brenton Strange again, who we did talk about last week, and he scored a touchdown, and no one appreciated my Doors reference that I tweeted out, but people are strange. Houston, their linebackers historically have been very, very bad in tight end coverage, but as I understand, the defense as a whole is playing tight ends well. That said, we've talked about how Gabe Davis has a poor matchup on the outside. Christian Kirk apparently can't play anymore, and Trevor Lawrence is either bad or they just keep hiring bad coaches. Either way, he looks to his tight end a lot. I think if you are in a pinch, Brenton Strange remains tight end one streamable. No, it's not pretty, but the position isn't. And we at least have a guy right now who has his quarterback's trust. I'm just double checking as we're live to see if there's any updates for Thursday. No, Evan Ingram, he was a DNP on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I don't see anything currently on him, but if Strange is the starter, he's as good as it gets for this position, which is saying a lot. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I'm with you. I mean, it is like, essentially he's a top 12 play if Evan Ingram isn't playing this week. Plus there's just like a ton of injuries at the position, but even still, like kind of like what we've been seeing from Brenton Strange since Evan Ingram's been out, among Jacksonville receiving options to have run at least 25 routes. Brenton Strange leads the way in terms of overall target rate at 21.1%, average depth of target at 14. He also leads them in touchdowns with a total of 1, and is second on the team in red zone target rate at 25% and yards per route run at 1.35. So TBD on if Ingram plays or not. Let's assume he doesn't. I feel like Brenton Strange can definitely be a startable tight end for us once again.
All right, moving on. It's just after that slew of hideous statistics, the team best hideous statistics. Yes. Next guy, Isaiah Likely. He's still out there in about 25% of leagues. And I think if you added him, after week 1, you're just staring at him on your bench going, what do I do? So from the defenses to exploit piece, we talked about how Buffalo, missing their linebackers, missing Teron Johnson, run a lot of zone coverage. They are good, but Baltimore boasts 3 pass catchers with at least 9 targets earned against zone coverage. Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, and actually Justice Hill. Likely's target rate is 22.7% in these situations. All 3 players rank inside the top 50 in target rate, and Likely's 2.43 yards per route run against zone coverage ranks 4th best among 14 qualifying tight ends. We're going to learn a lot about what's going on with this tight end room. Isaiah Likely, they did not run a lot of routes last week, but he did lead Mark Andrews in routes run in week 3. Tight end is so barren that if you have him out there and you have a question at tight end, I say start Isaiah Likely and let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, he has the best matchups for tight ends this week, according to PFF strength of schedule or tight end matchup chart. That is, you look at what the Bills have done against previous tight ends. They've allowed Trey McBride. He was PPR tight end 10 that week. Jonnu Smith was the PPR tight end 6 in week 2 against the Bills. And then, of course, last week, Brenton Strange, PPR tight end 8 against the Buffalo Bills. So they've allowed top 10 finishes to tight ends in 3 straight weeks here to go along with the start of or lack of starting linebackers, I should say. Also backup safeties in there, backup nickel corners. The Bills, offense is susceptible here. And so why Isaiah Likely kind of over Mark Andrews, I guess, Nate kind of highlighted this one in his Start Sit article as well. But Isaiah Likely has consistently played in 12 and 22 personnel this season, and then split the 11 personnel snaps with Mark Andrews last week. So the point being, if they continue to kind of split that 11 personnel work, then Likely is the tight end that's going to see the field more and probably the guy to trust more than Mark Andrews. And you look at the matchup again this week, the Ravens against the Bills, they're unlikely to have like a large lead, right? So when the Ravens are ahead this season, only 17% of Baltimore's pass plays are where Likely is able to run a route. When they're losing, he's running a route on 48% of their pass plays. So there might not, be like a lot of games like that for the Ravens because they're such a good team. But this is one of those games where it should be a closer game where they are, again, passing a little bit more and favoring Isaiah Likely just based on the usage, as Nate's pointed out. So, I like Likely this week as well. All right. Who else did you have on the list here? Or were there, I guess maybe not waiver wire names, but you had some kind of bonus names on here. Who else did you want to touch on before we get into the defensive special team streamers?
Yeah, so Roschon Johnson was an ad this week. He's facing Los Angeles. Rome Odunze, I don't know his rostership rate, but I know he was available. There were a lot. Twitter was like, should I pick him up? They're playing Los Angeles. So as for Rome, I think Keenan Allen's coming back, but Rome's going to be working downfield. Like we talked about earlier in the show, Los Angeles lost their best coverage defender in their safety, John Johnson. I think Rome Odunze is going to pick up a couple explosive pass plays, and I think that he should be started here as a wide receiver 3/flex. In terms of Roschon Johnson, I wrote about this in June as ambiguous backfields to target. Khalil Herbert was a more efficient rusher last year than DeAndre Swift, and Roschon Johnson was both a better passing down player, pass pro, and as a receiver, and he was better in the red zone than Swift. Chicago's whole front office just needs to go. The coaches need to go. They don't know what they're doing. So he is risky. So Roschon is risky. But right now, it looks like they're going to give him a chance at an increased workload. I think this is the type of matchup where you can start him. I'll probably sneak him in maybe at like RB 35, 36. So I'm not terribly confident in this. But I think I think he'll get like 10 to 14 touches here. They'll try it and see what happens. But where are you on Roschon this week?
Yeah, he's definitely somebody that I think, should be added at this point. I probably not necessarily like a start just yet. Like, I guess if you're in such a deep league, like if you're in those leagues, you're starting like the Alexander Madisons or Antonio Gibsons of the world, those passing down backs, then I would definitely prefer Roschon there. For the most part, he's kind of like a hold for me right now. Like, I love the potential. Hate what we've seen from DeAndre Swift so far. He's been terrible. 1.8 yards per carry this season. That ranks last among running backs. We're also seeing, guys cut into that playing time for DeAndre Swift as well. So I like Roschon Johnson. He's probably, more of like a deep league option for me. Like you said, around that RB 36 range is probably about right for him. But yeah, I definitely want him rostered at this point because it's trending down for DeAndre Swift and looking positive for Roschon Johnson. All right. Any other names before we go to the defense special team streamers?
No, we're good to go.
Let's do it. So who are your defensive special team streamers to take advantage of this week?
So we touched on one of them earlier, and I'm getting lost in my notes here. Minnesota Vikings defense at Green Bay Packers. Their efficiency metrics are pretty low because they blitz so frequently, but their counting statistics, so Minnesota defensive coordinator Brian Flores, 51.0% blitz rate, ranks second among NFL teams. defense respectively ranked 7th and 8th while blitzing in both success rate and EPA allowed per play. 68 quarterback pressures and 15 NFL sacks so far. Both figures ranked top 2. I think that they're going to be able to rack up points against Jordan Love returning with the MCL sprain. They're probably like a mid-tier DST1 unit because the Green Bay Packers offense is really good. But I think that this is the kind of matchup where they can get it done. Do you have any notes here?
No, not really. I think you pretty much covered the things I was going to say. Second highest blitz rate, sacks, all those kinds of things. Brian Flores has these guys playing on fire right now.
Right. The next one is New Orleans Saints at Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins continues to rack up underthrows. He is up to Atlanta Falcons. It ties for a league high 6 underthrown passes, ranking 29th in turnover worthy play rate while tying for the 6th most turnover worthy plays. He bought himself a little time with that comeback, but I think the change to Michael Penix is coming eventually. New Orleans number 1 cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, he's going to be bodying Drake London. Now, I told people to sit Drake London last week, and he scored a touchdown, and hey, that's really aggravating, but it's touchdown can kind of solve everything. Lattimore played really well despite coming back from multiple injuries. He's another week healthier. I think that he can create problems for this passing game. The Saints running back coverage is also among the league's best, top 5 in both catch rate allowed and yards allowed per coverage snap. I think that Bijan Robinson, he'll be fine. He'll be able to, he'll be an RB1, but they might be able to kind of corral him a little bit more than normal through the air. So I like New Orleans against Atlanta.
Nice. Yeah. New Orleans has been, they've been really good still. 6th highest graded defense on the year, 4th highest graded coverage unit. Atlanta's just kind of been like average to maybe slightly above average in a lot of the offensive categories as well. So like those calls there, but that is going to do it for us today. Thank you all again for tuning in, watching, listening, however you do. As always, if you've enjoyed this, please feel free to like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or leave a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast. We always appreciate that, and it helps us a ton. Nick, massive thank you to you as well for doing this with me, as always. And before you go, please do remind everybody what you have up on PFF.com this week to check out.
QB defense streamers comes out on Tuesdays. Then defenses to exploit Wednesdays, and wide receiver cornerback matchups released on Thursdays. Hit me up on Twitter at Nic Bodiford NFL. Thank you, John.
I appreciate you, man. As for me, I wrote up the wide receiver man zone coverage report. That's out now on PFF.com, as well as the O-line D-line matchup article, O-line D-line matchups to target and avoid article. That'll be out on Friday morning. IDP rankings, IDP fantasy report for my fellow IDP DGens. And of course, make sure to check out Nate's ranking, start, sit, and recap articles as well. Good luck to everybody in week 4. And until next time, peace out.